Yo guys, what's going on? It's Max, and in today's video, I wanted to go over a topic that I kind of bring up sometimes in a couple of the comments for the discussions that I make, as well as it came up on stream a couple times, and I just kind of wanted to expand a little bit on the subject, and more so try to bring in a little bit more context and information to a very common phrase that's thrown around in the DBD community. I've done it myself. I recently made a video on it. Um, and it's the whole killer sided versus survivor sided thing. I'm not going to harp on it too much more. But the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about was whenever we talk about the game being X or Y sided, but there is a disparity, most notably on the killer side of the game. And this was one of the comments in one of my videos, really, kind of brought it to light as a core perspective that the choice in Survivor doesn't really matter outside of cosmetics and, the volume of grunting. Whereas when you're playing a different killer, your entire game plan just fundamentally changes. And I feel as though there are a lot more variables that go into the killer's choice in the game that would change the outcome of the statement of the game being survivor or killer sided. What I mean by that, because I know that was a little bit winded, like it's hard to say the game is killer sided when you're using a sample of killers like Trapper, like Pig, Myers, Bar, the Tombstone piece, Ghostface. Those killers, like, cool, but I feel like they're relatively weaker, especially when you're looking at the higher end compared to Nurse and Blight, right? If you're talking about the game being survivor sided and killer sided, and yet when you take it's hard because I always see people like isolating cases of killers, like the game is killer sided because look at how strong Nurse and Blight are. And while I get that, I think it's important, you can identify points of balance from the end of exactly like what is the strongest thing that each side can do, and that can kind of inherently determine the balance of the game. That to make that lump sum statement across the game doesn't feel fair when there already is enough of a disparity between killers. Um, and I noticed that a lot. Like I even sometimes I end up bringing that up as a point in case. But for survivors, and this is kind of the biggest thing, kind of like I mentioned, there's no difference in the survivor you play. Obviously, like I said, bar cosmetics, probably the size of your player model, some grunts. Sure, if we really want to try and min max it, there's a fundamental difference. When you go to the comp scene, I've seen a ton of Ace, a ton of Ada and Claudette, and like they're all survivors that generally speaking have quiet volumes and decent cosmetics to blend. I realize there is a difference there, but it's nowhere near to the extent that you'll see how, in my opinion, fundamentally different a Wraith plays from a Huntress that plays from a Trapper and a Blight. Like they all do different things, and when you try to analyze the game being quote unquote killer sided, but you don't take into account how many differences exist in these different groups, it's just kind of baffling. Also, really quick, you'll see the Plague's gonna get caught here on an invisible wall. That is a bug reported to behavior. Admittedly, I ran there because I wanted to test if it was my game or if this is actually just a universal bug, but I submitted it as a report. There's people talking about it on the forums. They are aware of it. I tried my best to not abuse that as much, but I just wanted it to be known, like, that is a thing in the game that the devs are working on. Point aside, the that's kind of like my biggest, not really a gripe, because it's not like something that frustrates me, but it's like when you say the game is killer sided and you isolate Nurse, Blight, maybe a little bit of Spirit as the killers to be the killer sided in the game, and you take Mother Daughter Ring, Compound 33, Alchemist's Ring, I don't know the name of Nurse's add-ons, but Nurse add-ons, like, go figure, the killers are probably going to be doing a great job. And it's hard to say that when you compare killers with that level of strength to a no add-on Trapper, there's a pretty big difference, And so to me, I understand that I have a bias. I think the game, when it comes to very efficient survivors, very proficient killers. The game leans survivor sided. I just make that as my personal opinion. That's how I feel about the game. I think survivors, at least how I've seen it, have been able to play extremely efficiently to the extent that killers, I'm going to say almost the majority of killers, if not every single one, have a hard time keeping up with it. When I watch community cups and, the tournament players who play better, they can clearly show off that as killer, they understand the game well enough to know how to make pressure work against very efficient survivors. But that it's also, there's also the whole other side where they already ban add-ons, right? So like when you ban add-ons above a certain rarity, you already know there's even more disparity in your add-ons. In my opinion, Myers is among the weaker killers in the game. You hand him a tombstone piece, he can, I think Otz made a video talking about imbalanced add-ons where in 2 minutes you actually just remove someone from the game. And if any killer has the power where in 2 minutes you turn the game into a 3v1, I'm pretty sure that game is pretty winnable. You can't get a whole lot of progress done with getting someone out in 2 minutes while, you're also stalking, applying a little bit of pressure. So it's so hard to make a blanket statement like that, in my opinion, where, a killer is super strong and simultaneously there's a killer that's super weak, and yet we can say the game is excited because of that. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that up, kind of bring it to attention, because I feel like, at least for me, I want to try and do my job of making sure whenever it comes to conversations regarding balance, that we look at it from more of a perspective of power outliers and trying to bring them in line rather than saying it's survivor or killer sided, which is really what I hope I've been trying to do in, my videos more recently, where I would say, I feel like Nurse is pretty strong. We can adjust some of those add-ons. I think Blight base kit is really cool. He's up there, but I think some of his add-ons push him above the edge way too much. I think there's killers like Wraith who have awesome add-ons and is designed as a cool killer. I personally think he underperforms, but some people, have struggles with him. I think Trapper needs buffs almost across the board. So there's like so many different power portions of the game that I think need to be adjusted before we can really say the game is survivor or killer sided. And even the same thing on survivor side, right? Like I play more survivor than I do killer right around now. Like I used to play more killer, now I do survivor. But like, even if I thought the game was survivor sided or killer sided, Dead Hard was a very frustrating perk against certain killers. I think it should have gotten nerfed. It did. I think Boone's Circle of Healing was an extremely problematic perk that countered a lot of struggling playstyles, and it got nerfed. I'm happy that it did. If I look at what survivors are running right now, I think Off the Record is a pretty prevalent perk. Prove Thyself is there all the time. I don't know if these perks need to be nerfed, but I think the prevalence and frequency of those perks being used are a relative indicator of their strength, which is what should be the focus of determining if they should be nerfed or not, and so in that situation, that's really how I think about it, right? Like, to say the game is killer sided, meaning we need to buff killers / nerf survivors, I feel like may not be a good blanket statement if there's already a disparity in killers or, quite a wide gap in survivor perks. That's basically the whole gist of this video. I'm not going to ramble on too much more about it. The background game ended, but it's just something to take note of, especially because when I see people talking about the game being killer sided and they want to isolate the evidence piece they pick of, Nurse and Blight are in the game, of course it's killer sided, or have you seen how quick gens fly by, it's survivor sided. I think once the power outliers along survivor and killer are more in line, then we can start to actually look at, okay, which side is overperforming, underperforming, and what components of them are. I would love to see that data. I think Behavior has done a pretty good job in balancing, but it definitely seems like with the data they've had, like they were trying to nerf the Billy add-ons in the more recent patch. So who knows exactly what's happening with that information, but regardless, just wanted to make the video. I feel like it's something that's worth talking about, at least worth noting, because if you talk about the game being killer-sided and then you nitpick your evidence for it being, particularly one-sided or the other, it's not a full encompassing story. And I think that's more important to really look at, which is why I try to propose balance changes, or at least look at things that seem like more power outliers, regardless of which side it is. That's basically it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. I may be a little bit slow on videos. Thursday is my birthday, and I got some job interviews lined up this week. So I'm going to do my best to try and stay on schedule. I'm going to get this video out right now because it's supposed to go up in like 40 minutes. So if you're a 360p member, you know exactly why. Take it easy, everybody, and peace.